Welcome. We're going to wait just a few minutes as people are starting to come in, and then we will get started in just a moment. Good day and welcome. I'm going to go over a few housekeeping rules as people are still starting to join us for today's webinar. Thank you all for arriving on time and welcome to our latest webinar, Unlock the ROI of GIS Managed Cloud Services. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jennifer LaRue. I am your logistics coordinator for today's session. Before we get into the meat of this whole webinar, I just want to do a quick overview, a little bit of housekeeping. Please make sure that you can hear and see me, that you can see our slide at the top. If you're having any troubles, obviously, please feel free to restart. You can also reach out to us in the chat and we'll do our best to help you with any technical difficulties. As I draw attention to the Zoom controls, if you've attended a webinar, obviously there is the chat for any questions or issues. There's also a Q&A that I'd like to draw your attention to during today's session. If there's any questions that you have about the content as we're going through it, there will be a dedicated moment towards the end of today's session where we will go through the live Q&A. So please feel free to drop your questions there throughout the webinar. We also will have a couple of polls and we want those to be really interactive and your insights are extremely valuable to us and to this session. And so please keep an eye out for those coming up shortly. First, though, I would love just to share a little bit about Rock Technologies before I hand off the reins to Alex Coleman. Really quickly, Rock Technologies, we take GIS to the cloud. Our sole focus is to architect and deploy and manage the ArcGIS Enterprise Suite and desktop application in cloud and hybrid environments. We have several specialty designations from Esri, the cloud specialty partner. We are the first and only Kubernetes specialty partner, and we are a platinum business partner with Esri. We have a team of certified cloud and Esri experts, and we really focus on clients first. And that's why we're here to talk about ROI and how we can help our clients. And that really is reflected in a 99% client retention rate. So with that being said, I do want to get into our first poll question just to help orient our audience on what we're hearing, what we're talking about. And so as I launch it, curious to hear, what are your organization's top priorities as it relates to GIS and IT investments over the next 12 months? There's a lot of different directions, there's a lot of different needs. And so we're just curious how you're looking to make those investments. Additionally, there's a second question on this poll screen. Curious from your perspectives, securing funding for cloud and managed cloud services, those partnerships, is this currently a barrier for your organization? If you can just take a minute to help answer those questions, we'd appreciate it. Early on, we got a few responses coming in. It looks like we're kind of, people here are focused on expanding and upgrading infrastructure, and a close second with over like 71% of attendees in that category, followed by modernizing technology platforms. And then, I think that this is interesting. As far as securing funding, it seems pretty well evenly split, with about 37% saying it's a challenge, 26% saying that funding's not an issue, and then another 32% that are currently working on securing funding. So that's interesting that it's a pretty even split there. Thank you for taking the time to answer those polls. And I think I'm going to now hand it over to our host for today's session, Alex Coleman. Please, let's go into unlocking the ROI of GIS Managed Cloud Services.
Well, thank you very much, Jen. And yes, thanks to you for everyone attending today. It's excited to be able to have this conversation, which I really hope it will be, whether it be in chat or, when we take breaks for questions. But, I think this is timely looking at the responses to the poll, which I'm kind of looking at here in the bottom right. It is interesting whether you're looking to expand or upgrade your infrastructure. Obviously, cloud is probably becoming, if it's not already, a real consideration, right? And hopefully even, managed cloud services along with that. When you're modernizing your technology, all those good things, cost reduction, it all really plays a role in what we're about to talk about today. And for those of you, whether or not you have funding and you're not facing that challenge today, you may at some point have justifications for modernization and bringing on support, to really grow your GIS presence. And for those of you that are facing the funding challenges, our real hope is that we give you some tools to build a case internally to bring on the support that you need and hopefully also make that move to the cloud. So that's really what we're going to talk about. So first, we're going to do a really quick kind of overview of what you should be able to expect from a managed cloud service provider. I'm guessing a lot of you attending the webinar already have a pretty good idea of what happens in this space, but it will just be a level set moment for all of us. Make sure we're all on the same page. Then we're going to get into how you build your case. And the reason we kind of tell you a little bit about who we are to start this webinar is, as you can imagine, being in this space and this being all we do, we've worked with organizations from Fortune 50 international companies down to very small, and I mean very small, state and local government counties. And in every case, obviously, internally, they have to build some sort of, presentation to talk through why they want to not just move to the cloud, but have the support for their GIS to really expand. So we want to be able to share some of the best practices and some of the things that we've learned from those folks that have really helped them move the needle. And then cover some funding options. So from a national level, et cetera, some places you can go to potentially get funding for these opportunities, especially for those of you who, may need some assistance on the budget side. We'll go through some common budgeting rebuttals. Again, as you can imagine, we've heard a lot of these. The folks that we've partnered with over the years have heard a lot of these. So we've collected kind of the top 7, along with how they were able to address those internally to move the needle, and then finally give you a quick overview of all the tools that we're going to give you following this webinar that will hopefully help keep things going. So first and foremost, let's talk really quick, a level set moment for GIS Managed Cloud Services. This again is probably something you all know, but there are really 5 main areas that you should expect assistance with when you're working with a GIS MSP. The first part, which is a really important part and can also sometimes be seen as a solo act or a solo partnership, but it comes in the very first stages. So when you're assessing and planning that move to the cloud or that move to add additional infrastructure, let's say you already have the enterprise stack and you're going to add the utility network or indoors or what have you, or you're literally you're going from ArcGIS server to the enterprise stack. Regardless, it's great to have that partner with you to truly assess what's going on, what GIS needs do you have today, what are your GIS needs going to be once you add in these additional components, and help you plan that out. So architecture and budget both. And this is really good because you can have, it's interesting. We've worked with some very large organizations that have pretty darn mature, cloud IT on staff. And yet when it comes to the Esri enterprise software, that is where, that familiarity isn't that close. It is a more complex software now, along the lines of what we're seeing with like ERP systems, like SAP, et cetera. Like IT can't be expected to know everything. And so, even for validation, having those folks take the first pass, build out an architecture, bringing in an MSP to really take a look at it, ensure that you're on the right track is a great thing to do in the very beginning. And then, of course, verifying budget and validating what you have in your budget for that move to the cloud or that expansion of your infrastructure. Secondly, the second piece of the puzzle here, probably not a big surprise, it follows in suit in timeline alignment with what we just spoke of, and that's building and migrating the environment. So deploying the virtual machines, installing and configuring the software the appropriate way, getting the security set up appropriately, and then migrating your content. Interesting thing with migrating content, we find a lot of folks would like to do it themselves or they just want to start fresh. A lot of different options there for anyone who wants to make the move. But again, that should be something you can go on, that journey you can go on with experts that have done it a lot. It'll speed up your process. It'll make sure, help you kind of think through the decision making there and hopefully make it a really clean experience. Once you're in the cloud, then of course you've got the big three on the left. So the IT support, and we look at that really about supporting that infrastructure. We'll get into that a little more detail here in a second. But that IT support is a big piece. The Esri software support, obviously equally important and hopefully really beneficial to those who take advantage of that type of a partnership. And then security and disaster recovery. So if you're in the cloud, making sure that the security truly aligns with your organization and that your disaster recovery plan is the best it can be. So you're not experiencing downtime and you have a truly resilient system. So again, those are kind of the big five you should expect from any GIS, managed cloud service provider. And digging into the two kind of big pieces for ongoing service a little bit more, on that infrastructure side, having folks really monitoring that infrastructure stack for performance to understand when you may need to right size machines, making sure your backup and retention is happening at the schedule that you need it. So if anything were to go down, with your system, or someone were to just go in and do something really nutty with your database, someone at your organization that has access or do something really crazy and you need to go back, that you have the right backup and retention there to support and keep you going. Virtual desktop solutions, how your people are getting access, to the environment, and then that 24/7 support. All of that would generally be handled by an internal in-house IT. And this is an opportunity for them to kind of relieve themselves of that burden for the enterprise stack. And with your partnership with managed services provider. On the Esri side, a lot of this is probably pretty logical, right? These are your upgrades are being handled by this partner that you choose to work with. All of your patches and security updates are being handled by those folks. Oftentimes any tickets or cases that you may need to, for some reason, submit to Esri would be managed by that partner. So it really allows the GIS and the IT side to focus on doing what they do best and not maintaining and managing a system from an administrative perspective. So it should open up a lot of opportunities for growth and expansion. And there are two real options here when you're looking at working with an MSP. Again, most organizations that are mature in this business will be able to offer both of these options. One is more of what we would call a SaaS option. That's where the MSP that you're working with also is running and owns or pays for the cloud infrastructure. So they're responsible for and literally contractually responsible for your uptime. They are contractually liable and responsible for your security. All of those things that can tend to be kind of the nerve moments when people think about moving to the cloud. Things that might give them hesitancy. Going a SaaS model kind of relieves that pressure. There's also what we call a non-tenant model. These are for organizations that already have a mature cloud environment and they don't want, their GIS to live in a different house. They want to carve out a house to give the managed service provider access to manage. So both are available out there. It really depends on, again, kind of the tolerance and hope for uptime, your security posture and confidence in the organization, and how you want to structure. But both of those opportunities are out there and available for y'all. So now that we kind of have level set on what GIS Managed Cloud Services are and what you should be able to expect, let's really get into how to build a case for going to not just the cloud, but to a cloud with support. And here, again, and this isn't talking to a lot of the folks that we've worked with, there are really two big ways that or two big points to this conversation and things you really want to explore to build a really thorough case for this budget. On the left-hand side is the money, right? And this is all the quantitative stuff. So existing, what are the costs of the servers you need to support your existing enterprise? Also, what are the costs of those servers that you're going to need to expand? Right. So a lot of people are buying it's still, hardware in those 3-year cycles. So are you having to overspend today to support what you want to do with your enterprise 3 years from now? Right. So again, just really shoring up what are those costs that you're going to have to spend to support your current GIS and your future 3-year forward GIS. The other piece is for personnel, right? What is the cost of, maintaining the number of people and the growth that you would need to hire to support the goals that your organization has? It doesn't matter the vertical you're in. GIS is expanding at a very rapid rate. This is happening, and we're seeing it happening, happen everywhere from utilities to AEC, architecture, engineering, and construction, state and local government, transportation, you name it. GIS is growing. And there's also a real struggle when it comes to professionals that are really strong in this space. This is going to be a really good market for us to tell everybody in college to go into because there's a real need here, right? So when we're thinking about hiring personnel to support the growth of our organizations, what is the cost of that? What does that look like? What does that timetable look like? What are potential risks associated with that? And then what about your downtime and your current performance? So how does your current GIS system operate? Is it performant? Are you, screaming through your projects and, you've got great uptime and visibility for any of the clients that are using your web services, whether it be your constituents or your customers, et cetera. Is there downtime there or are you running, perfectly? There's a cost associated with downtime, right? There's a cost associated with people being angry and frustrated with work. There's a cost associated with maybe you not be able to serve out a product in the way that you need to. And then you compare those costs to the cost of the cloud servers. Again, hopefully very well architected, really strong understanding of what you're going to need to support your enterprise and having the monthly cost around that. And then, of course, the cost for the managed service provider. So for all those services we talked about before, for them providing you those services, what is that cost? And it's really at that point, from a quantitative perspective, from a money perspective, comparing those two pieces. And if it were that simple and that easy, honestly, usually about 95% of the time, you're still going to come out ahead on the bottom. But it's going to be a closer head. It's going to be more of a neck and neck run in terms of the costs. But when you add in the qualitative, so it's everything on the right side, this is when you really start to see the true return on investment of entering into a partnership with a team of professionals that can help your organization. On the IT side, and again, we've talked to a lot of IT sides of the house, and they are happy for this. They are tasked with focusing on the core health of their organization. There are plenty of strong software and laptops and printers and all of those things that sit in that core house, right? And then you have these more complex softwares sitting around that it is very difficult. It's like, the jack of all trades argument, right? When you're talking about these really complex softwares, it can be a real burden on IT organizations to have to try and support those at the level people want, right? And that can be extremely frustrating. So, what the time and effort that they can get back from being able to let go of these complex softwares can be pretty astounding. Yeah, and really great return on investment argument for, if nothing else, sanity, peace of mind, and time. GIS team being able to actually focus on putting out great content, not on upgrading enterprise, not on doing patches, not on tickets and keeping it operational, but truly on innovating and creating great content for the folks that they're serving. There is a lot of ROI there. Depending on the organization, that may even be quantitative ROI. If you're an engineering firm or et cetera, I mean, there's a lot of people that this is a revenue slot for them. But either way, it's certainly, a positive thing for the group that you work for. And ultimately that leads to money somewhere, right? So calling that into focus and really, pulling out what you would be able to do, if you had support is really important. Reduce liability. This is one that we're seeing a lot more as well. What type of insurance does your organization have against any sort of like attack, right? Do we want to get rid of certain types of liability, on uptime, on cybersecurity and whatnot, so that that doesn't sit, on our organization's bottom line, that's sitting on someone else's. Again, as you can imagine, becoming more and more popular. And then, of course, the last three really all kind of tie together. Having a truly performance system, being able to innovate, and having a team behind you that, has reliable know-how so you can do what you need to do. There is a ton of awesome opportunity that can be pulled out and presented and should be, if you're making this case. Ultimately, really, it's the difference between having, a small team that's trying to do everything versus having a fully loaded team that is going to be there because they're your partner and that's what they do for you, right? And you don't have to worry about turn and churn internally at all. And you can really focus on them and accomplish great things. And if nothing else, another really true and important piece is that this is the trend. This is the way organizations are going. You're more and more they are offloading. Again, it's not that core IT work necessarily, right? Because that's extremely important and it's you're usually very individual to the organization, but more and more they are offloading the services for the more large complex softwares out of house and getting it taken care of so they don't have to worry about it. So again, as you're making the case, I think it's really important to talk about what's happening nationally. We're seeing it again at the state level. We've seen, again, even at the Fortune 50, Fortune 100, Fortune 100 company level, where they're saying, you want to bring on a new software? Guess what? That's great. You're managing it. So you find a way, you find the know-how and get that done. We're not adding that to the burden of our core IT. So this is a trend. It's a very real trend and it's only growing. And hopefully those types of numbers could help make the case internally. In addition to that, we have some really great case studies. I think the first thing everyone wants to know, right, is who, that's a funny fade. What people really want to see are examples, right? It sounds like it all looks good. I've put together this great presentation and I have all these numbers and it looks good, but has this really worked for other folks? And, hey, we're not the only MSP out there. There are a lot of really awesome case studies, even outside of Rock, to use. We've pulled some together that kind of cross the different verticals that you can use to help. And the interesting thing is, in each of these, for each of these organizations, they started off with a challenge. And their benefits were multifold. So the one challenge that they solved by going to a cloud with a managed service provider, right? That one challenge that was solved. But in addition, they reached all those other benefits, a lot of which were on that qualitative side of the slide that we were looking at, right? So it's really interesting. So like, for example, this ETM, their engineering firm down in Florida, right? There are challenges they needed to have. They're serving out their clients. They needed to ensure that those services that were being served out were up, period, end of story. They have to be running. We have to make sure that this is getting out to our clients. Problem solved, but if you look over at the benefits, they also realized all of these other pieces of the puzzle that, again, we mentioned on the slide before. They really truly are kind of the downflow and pieces that if you think about it for a while and really collect a good list, they are pieces of the puzzle you will solve. So I mean they were able to upgrade on time, they were able to expand their use of GIS, and their productivity overall grew. So it wasn't just what they were serving to their clients. It was all of these other pieces. So super important. Anne Arundel County. So now we're talking about a government. And I don't know if it's transitioning really slow for you all or just me, but I have this funny fade thing going on. Anne Arundel County, awesome county in Maryland, they were looking at it from more of a staffing perspective. So how can we make sure that we've got, confidence in staff? And they have some really great partnerships internally to assist with their GIS. But again, the benefits weren't just the staff. It wasn't just the staffing that they were able to solve. It was increasing the capabilities, adding additional workflows, and even getting better performance in their system overall. And let me tell you, this county, if you want to see some county really doing some awesome stuff, you check out their GIS footprint because it's pretty darn incredible. But again, went in, we have a staffing issue, we're going to solve it, and found a lot of other benefits that, if you'd known that in the beginning, you could have added it to your return on investment presentation. And then last but not least, we're just using Vodafone UK as a good example of they needed to accomplish something really specific in terms of getting a digital twin up and running. That required an upgrade, that required, again, know-how and expertise. Let's get the software we need in place, let's get it rolling and make this digital twin. And of course, the value at the end of getting that going for the digital twin specifically is extremely important and very easy to quantify. But in addition to that, again, they saw overall performance improvements for everything they did from a GIS perspective. So it's pretty exciting to see how, once you get the right team around you, once you're in a cloud where you can scale and do all the great things we know about the cloud, how you truly can accomplish exciting things. So let's move into navigating funding opportunities. So we've built our case and we've got a strong case, but in some cases, guess what? There may not always still be a budget, right? Because there may literally not be a budget. So what are some of the funding opportunities out there? For the folks here at Rock that look into and research this side of things, some of the biggest recommendations that they have are first identifying your priorities and going after grants and funding from a priority, not necessarily the keyword aspect. So not necessarily looking for GIS and cloud, but thinking about what are you trying to accomplish with it? Is it modernizing infrastructure? Is it, more specific to the end goal that you want to see happen after you get the funding and modernize your GIS, and searching for money along those lines can oftentimes be a more successful route. There are national initiatives going on right now across the board that you can apply for. And again, we've put all of these tools in our guides so you can access these and kind of check out some of these sites to see the ones that might apply to you. Other ways you can also approach this move, and we've seen this work again for a lot of folks, is looking at your first foray into the cloud as like a proof of concept. So sometimes there's funding for proof of concept, or you may have the budget now for that initial move of part of your program, with knowing that, say, in year 2, you're going to move the rest, especially for larger organizations, right? So for those folks, we've seen this happen a lot, like, for example, with the utility network. It's like, hey, let's do a POC, let's get the utility network running in the cloud, and we're going to keep that going for a year, 6 months, whatever the timeline is. And then in second year budget, year 2, we're moving everything else. So kind of that phased approach, proof of concept approach, you may want to call it, is also a really smart way to get there if you truly are budget strapped. And the other nice thing about that is, if it's not just budget, if you have folks internally that are just wary about it in general, it gives them an opportunity to get comfortable with it, right? You kind of prove that it works, you prove that it's performant and that it can stay on budget, and then everyone's happy. And then when everything else moves, you're in good shape. So those are some other options in terms of how you can approach move and funding. And in additional to, and we've also included these additional resources that you can click on to look for grants and whatnot that might be pertinent to you. So with that, I'm going to take a breath and give it over to Jen for another poll question.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. So we do have a quick poll that we would like to ask you guys. Um, you know, if you're in this situation or you've been in this situation, like what is the biggest challenge that you hear from your stakeholders when advocating for the cloud or potentially budgeting for a managed cloud service provider? We definitely hear a lot, and Alex is going to walk us through some of those challenges. But just curious from your perspectives, maybe you're hearing something different. Maybe there's something that we can talk about in our Q&A as well. And I'll also just take a moment as we're getting a few answers in. I know we're asking you to type a little bit, but thank you for those who have started to ask some questions in the chat and the Q&A. We will get to those here in a bit. So keep those coming. All right. We look like we've got a few responses. So I think, Alex, maybe you can share some of the ones that we hear.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. So as you can imagine, we've heard a lot of these, right? So primarily with folks we're working with, and they're like, oh, we really want to go. This is what we're facing internally. These are the types of the questions that they're getting that they need to respond to, right? And just so you know, we have actually answered all of these. And again, you'll see these shortly in the tools that we're going to provide you post. I'm not going to go through every single one of these. I imagine, though, that most of these will, or at least one of these will probably resonate with almost everyone who's on this call if you've gone down this journey. A couple that I would say that we hear probably more than others would be the middle one. I'm worried about becoming too reliant on a single cloud provider or a managed cloud service provider. And this is funny because this can be for folks that don't have a cloud environment at all and they're just moving this way for the first time. It can also be for organizations that have a cloud environment, but they want to go the SaaS route, right? And the interesting thing is here is that, again, depending on, this is where it comes really smart to just know your contracts, right? And know who you're talking to and make sure that if you're getting into an agreement for someone to build and manage your GIS, that agreement is easily gotten out of at end of term without any labor on your part, right? These are so it's a really important distinction and question to ask. It's funny that, oftentimes we tell people throughout the process, hey, make sure if you're talking to folks that you're finding out what the exit strategy is, because you should know, and there should be concern, if you're putting your enterprise software and your whole organization, your enterprise geodatabases and all that good stuff in someone else's cloud world, so to speak, right? You should know how you can get it out when it's over, and it should be a very easy process. So that's when we hear quite a bit. Also, would say the bottom left where it says our systems are outdated and complex. The worry of migrating a monster, right? For all of you out there that have very large, GIS implementations happening right now, there's always that concern. What else is this tied to? Do we really understand what's going to happen with this when we move it? Is everything going to break? Are we going to, all that good stuff. So, again, this is where it's so important to have a partner because done well and done correctly, that whole system should be reviewed. You can find those dependencies ahead of time. And also, work with someone to clean the closets. And we talk about this a lot, for those larger systems, this is an opportunity to really clean house and say, does all of this need to go or not? Right? Do we really need 500 map services or 100? What's going on with all these databases here? It's a really cool opportunity to just almost fresh start it and say, okay, we're going to take what we need, we're going to take what we use. And I mean, we had one really, really large state organization basically say, okay, we think we know what everybody uses. And guess what? If they're using something that we don't bring over, we'll hear about it. And if not, we'll know that nobody was using it to begin with. It's kind of funny. But yeah, so anyway, it's a great opportunity to clean up. And there can certainly be a case made for that because all of that residual content is doing is basically taking up space, whether it be in your existing servers or the servers you're going to move into. So either way, you'll get a great return on investment by doing that exercise regardless. And the rest of these, again, we have a whole tool set that I'll show you here in a sec that will answer the rest of these questions. But these are all very common. Again, I'm sure that most of you have heard one or more of these. So know that, this is something we hear across the board. And again, regardless of size of the organization or the vertical that you're in, these are kind of the constant knowns for the rebuttals. And in addition to the questions you're going to get asked or hit on, we want to arm you with what you should be asking as you're going down this MSP journey. There are a lot of great ones out there, for real. And that's an awesome thing. It just means it's a good space. It's a good space to be in. So, but it's good to do your due diligence and to ensure that when you make this partnership, you do so with someone that's going to set you up right. We don't want to see, people 8 months after going, oh my gosh, what happened? And then you're stepping in to help. You want to make sure that you align with the right folks from the beginning. So some of the things that you want to ask is, and I know it might sound like it goes without saying, but I think it's important is, what is their GIS and cloud experience? How long have they been doing this? What type of professionals do they have in house? Like, who are you really aligning yourself with? You think in a way you're kind of hiring these folks. So I would really look at it that way. Like, I'm going to be hiring these people. I'm going to be working with these people very closely if I'm talking to anyone on the actual GIS team. These are going to be like your right and left hand. So do you like them? Are these people that you want to work with? Do they have the know-how? It's really important stuff. What I mentioned before, what happens when or if and when you want to leave the contract. Let's say your IT decides we want to take it on and now it's going to be yours. What does that look like? Very, very important to know that. And if you ever, whether or not we ever do business together, if you're exploring this and you just want to know more about that, if you're looking at a contract now and I wouldn't even care who it was with, if you want to understand what that language should look like, you let me know. I hate to see people get caught up in a situation where their stuff is held hostage. It shouldn't be that way. You should be able to get your whole system back when and if you ever left a partnership of this nature. Other one, also very important, that can come back and get you, is what services are truly included in the monthly fee. So I've seen, for example, situations where patching might be included, but oh wait, it's time to upgrade. Now all of a sudden you're going to have to pay for that. So just make sure you really understand everything that's included and then everything that would potentially be extra money to you if it's not included. It can be surprising what ends up in that quote. So you just want to make sure you really know what that is, like what you're getting, what you're not getting. And then again, kind of in line with the first one, but truly, like, how long have they been in the space? It takes a while to see some of the things that can go on, especially if you're in a multi-vertical uh, world, which this is, right? There are a lot of nuances, a lot of interesting things can go on, a lot of ways to optimize systems based on, what you're doing with it. So it's good to know that the folks have been around and they've got the chops and they can support you as they should. And then lastly, again, these are all of the tools we're going to send your way. First and foremost is our return on investment calculator. At the end, this is a link that you can go to. You can enter in all your information. It asks for both the quantitative, but also your qualitative that we talked about on that first slide, that data. You're going to enter it in, and I'll show you really quick. At the end, the output looks something like this. It actually gives you your own PowerPoint presentation that will compare your costs today versus what your costs will be with a managed cloud service provider. And it also extrapolates that over multiple years. These are just two of the slides that you'll actually get as part of this exercise. I just wanted to show you that you're going to get some slides if you go through the ROI calculator. We also do at RUC have a free cloud readiness assessment. So if you want to understand budgets, a lot of folks need to do this. A lot of folks need to do this sometimes 2 years in advance. Anyway, we do that exercise for free, actually. So if you're just looking for the budget numbers right now and the architecture, maybe the first round architecture, that is A-okay. You go into the cloud readiness assessment, we contact you, go through the steps, and we give you the budget numbers and the architecture you need to do the right planning. We've got access to a lot of different links of resources for pretty much anybody that might have an angle here or might want to understand more about what these types of services are. Everything from case studies to IT research, all this good stuff. So we're hoping to really give you anything and everything you need to make your case. And then last but not least, again, I mentioned all of those questions. At the very end of our tool set, you'll see the answers that we've seen our clients give, and we've helped them give in some cases to their organizations, which really again helped them move the needle internally and get where they needed to go. So that is it for the overall presentation today. I hope that you found it helpful. I really truly hope it was helpful, because obviously this is near and dear to our heart that you're able to make this case, whether it's with us or without us. I think it's really awesome to see what GIS is doing and the support that these types of partnerships can give. I'm a firm believer in 100%. So thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. So I think we're going to get into some questions, but really quickly, Alex, I just wanted to share with the group some of the poll answers that kind of came in. I think there was quite a bit of this like lack of control or an unwillingness to give up control. I think some of the keywords, so control was a big keyword in a lot of the participants' answers, as well as in-house, right? And this idea of maybe if things aren't in-house, there's not control, or maybe there's more risk. But security and cost definitely were some of the common from our participants, common challenges that they face. Okay, so I think
that's surprising. That's surprising. And let me just say about that control one. This is interesting, and it's funny how things kind of fluctuate. But in the beginning, we started doing this. That was a really big thing. Control and security were probably the number one, especially from the IT side, right? This idea that they would be giving up something like kind of almost like giving up ownership over something and giving it to someone else. That can be a scary thing for a lot of folks. And for security, right, obviously then the liability goes. But what we're seeing more and more, and this is where it's great to have IT as part of these conversations, because for one thing, if you're partnering with a really good MSP, even if you're in a SaaS situation, that would be, for example, if you're working with us, that would be where we're paying the AWS bill. We've got your infrastructure and your software, but you still have as much control over that environment as you want and or need, right? It doesn't Just because you're going that way does not mean that they necessarily have to give up control at all, and they can, I
Mhm.
mean, so it doesn't have to be, there does not have to be a loss of control. And I think really having them be a part of that conversation so they can understand how these environments are built, the fact that they can still, have policy that flows into this environment that we would have to adhere to is a good thing, I think, oftentimes. And usually when they start to hear things like, hey, guess what? You don't have to upgrade enterprise anymore. They're like, really? Like that. There are certain things that will become interesting. There are certain areas usually that have been traditional pain points that they're going to lose responsibility over, that then it doesn't feel so much like losing control. It feels like, getting rid of things that they don't want to do anyway. When it comes to the GIS side of the house, again, the control is completely up to the GIS staff. If you wanted to partner with a managed service provider and just have them manage the infrastructure, and for whatever reason you really like to do the upgrades, do the upgrades, and that would be a negotiating point when you're making that agreement with the MSP. Say, listen, I don't want you to manage the Esri software, just do the infrastructure, or just do the software and don't do the infrastructure. Whatever it is, right? It really comes down to what you want to do, what your organization truly wants control over. And those conversations are really good to have, and they're fun to have because it's, sometimes people start somewhere and they think they want all of it, and then they realize what they'd be getting rid of, and then they really start to buy it. So it's, you never know.
Well,
Yeah.
you answered one of the questions that came in around, can managed cloud services be customized? And I think
Yeah.
that you kind of touched on that in response to that control question. So I think thank you for diving in and answering one of the questions
Oh,
ahead of
yeah,
time.
sure.
I do see a panelist has their hand raised. I want to go kind of in sequence. So just letting our participant, sorry, not our panelists, our participant know that I see that hand raised. We had a question come in while you were presenting around a specific example to their organization. So, their organization recently met with Esri and was told that ArcGIS Online was fairly basic, but was the main GIS SaaS solution or option available. The only other option was to virtualize their GIS infrastructure and move their servers to the cloud, which is not really a SaaS model, but more like an infrastructure as a service model. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, I mean, yeah, in a way, that's kind of what they're saying. So when we talk about SaaS, yes, at ArcGIS Online, for a true SaaS, software as a service, that is their SaaS model for sure. When we talk about enterprise, offering enterprise stack as SaaS, it's because what we say is it's as close to SaaS as you can get, because you still have to buy the licensing from Esri, right? So you still need to buy the enterprise licensing. But at that point, you can hand that licensing, give us access, I should say, to that licensing. We can stand it up in the VMs. We can manage those VMs, and we can manage the software, give you the access that you need to do your GIS, and you don't think about it at all other than that. So it's as SaaS as you can get with enterprise, being that you still have to purchase the license. It using a full tenant managed cloud service provider solution. Other than that, they are right. Yeah, of course. Yeah, ArcGIS Online is their SaaS offering. It's not enterprise. They're very, they're different, obviously, as you know. So different, but yeah, certainly the enterprise SaaS model is managed
Yeah.
cloud service at its
Uh,
finest.
yep. Just wanted to make sure everybody understood the layers there.
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
Yeah. So I think there's a question around sort of like time frames and, what do time frames look like? How, I guess maybe from, once you've transitioned into a managed cloud services, how does what does that look like? Where are you, what is that time frame?
In terms of from setting people, it's like in terms of setup or just.
Well, I think it's around sort of ROI, right? How quickly can you start to see and benefit from either
Oh,
that quantitative or qualitative ROI that you were talking about here?
I mean,
I'm not sure they didn't clarify, but
yeah, well, I'll say this, getting someone to the cloud, right, from assessment to fruition really depends on the size and complexity of your organization, as I'm sure you can imagine, right? I would say it's really smart to, again, I guess depending on the size and complexity, if you're looking at like, say, a base deployment, so you're very simple, you're, just a regular, a smaller shop using enterprise. I would plan for say 4 to 6 weeks to assess, get everything spun up, installed, configured, go. Larger organizations, honestly, we've seen, I mean, can take, 5, 6 months. And these are big ones, right? Really big and complex ones. But once you're in the cloud, once you're up and you're running and you have the support of the MSP beside you, they should start pretty much right away. Because again, you're not all the day to day that you were doing to maintain these systems before is no longer part of the workflow. So your IT isn't having to answer any questions. You're not having to do anything administratively. You're in an extremely performant environment. So you're hopefully working faster than ever before. And so it should just kind of almost start right away. Truly.
awesome. All right, I'm gonna well, we've got somebody who really wants to be interactive. And so I'm gonna hand it open and open the
That's
floor.
loaded. Who is it? I'm just kidding.
Uh,
Are
do
they
you
going
want
to
to ask
talk?
your question live? Or maybe you're allowed to talk, but maybe you're on mute. If you want to type your question, we can answer it that way too. Okay, so one more question, and then we'll wrap this up here. The question is sort of what trends are we seeing in the industry regarding cloud adoption? More specifically, I think if I read this question correctly, the idea of like when you adopt the cloud, right? Is there benefits around early adoption, or what happens if there's late adoption? Is there anything that needs to be factored in? I think as maybe organizations are trying to figure out when is the right time.
Yeah, I mean, the trend obviously is going to the cloud. I mean, and more, it's kind of amazing. And you think everyone thinks everyone's there. They're not. I mean, there's still if you just want to have kind of some fun one day. I don't know if you consider this fun. I don't know why I consider it fun. But if you just want to like do some research on what percent of let's even like government agencies in the United States are in the cloud, it'll kind of blow your mind. And then when you get to private sector, you're sitting there too. So there's a lot of growth left to go on that department. In terms of when, I mean, it really depends. You can go anytime. I mean, some logical cuts for budget are end of life for servers, right? I mean, if you just made a big investment, let's face it, on some servers, it's going to be a harder case to make that now all of a sudden you're going to let all of those sit idle and you're going to move to the cloud. So, if you have those, if you're living in that server cycle world, you'd really want to be looking into when they are sunsetting. The other common trend we're seeing is when you're adding something new to your stack or you're going to the enterprise for the first time, because that way you're starting something new anyway. And so the change is already happening. So anybody suffering from like the who moved my cheese syndrome it's like, well, we're going to make a change. We're going to make a change and a change and a change, right? Like, let's do it all at once. Let's get in the cloud. Let's get rolling and make sure we're in a super system. So, but other than that, truly, if you're not in one of those hardware cycles, and you're not up for any change, but you want to go because of all of the other benefits, right, of being able to partner, you can do it whenever. I mean, any time is a good time.
Awesome. So we have one last quick question. Can you briefly speak about the benefits of deploying enterprise on Kubernetes from a cloud cost standpoint? Is it more cost efficient? I know Mr. Harris has done a webinar on Kubernetes, and probably there might be
Yeah.
another one in the future, but can you share a bit there?
Yeah, we've done actually you should if you want to really hear some more about that, we do have a webinar on our website specifically about that not issue, question, I should say. Yeah, I mean, Kubernetes relies on Linux, which is inherently a less expensive backend than a traditional, setup would be. If the licensing, it all comes down to the licensing that goes along with Kubernetes. So if it's something you're interested in, it's awesome, by the way. I mean, huge proponents over here. We are big fans, big, big fans. The first thing that you would want to do as an organization is talk to your Esri rep and find out what the licensing for your organization looks like, because it is a little different than just your standard enterprise Esri enterprise licensing. So once you know that, from a cloud perspective, again, we can get it architected out and even show you the difference. It's very easy. Architecting one in Kubernetes and then being able to see it traditionally and comparing those costs is extremely easy to do. Generally speaking, you could probably argue that, yeah, your Kubernetes side would be less expensive because of some inherent things on the back end. But either way, it's awesome. I mean, our hope is that as it matures and matures and matures, everyone goes that way because it's pretty slick.
Awesome. Okay, I want to say there's lots more questions. We can't get to them all, but maybe there's a future where we can just kind of do an open Q&A and answer some of those raised hands from our participants live. Before we part ways, I just want to say thank you, Alex, for your time
Oh,
and your insights in
thanks
today's
everybody.
discussion. Also want to say thank you to all the attendees. If you have further questions and you want to keep the conversation going, please don't hesitate to reach out. We will send out the information here. We are always available. hello@rocktech.net is just a general inbox, but we will send you direct email addresses as well for any follow-up questions that you might have. I am going to launch one more quick poll. And this is really to help us help you. Thank
Wow.
you for attending today, and we would love to know what topics would you like us to talk about in a future webinar. We hear topics and we address those as we can, but maybe there's something that you would like us specifically to talk about. So please answer our quick poll
Oh,
before
yeah.
parting ways. What?
Yeah, we take that to back up what Jen said, we'd love to hear, if there's anything specific to this area that you'd like to hear about. We'd love to talk to you about it. So that'd be great.
Yeah. But thank you again for joining us. We really do appreciate your time and participation. And on behalf of Rock Technologies, we really do look forward to connecting with you again soon and seeing you at our next webinar. So thanks again. Have a great day and goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.